Okay, hello, welcome to an updated revision video. We're going to take a look for a few minutes at the important concept of relative poverty. Our focus will be on income, but please keep in mind that relative poverty is multidimensional and that income is a narrow, albeit important focus. So, key definition coming up. What do we mean by relative poverty? Relative poverty is somebody's income that is considerably lower than the median income within a country. And the relative poverty line is usually household disposable income after tax and benefits, of less than 60% of median income. Now, why do we use median? Well, median, of course, takes the middle value in a distribution, and median per capita income tends to reveal the progress or not of a typical person in society, and it's not influenced to what happens at the tails of the income distribution for people on low incomes and high incomes. So median is often preferred as a measure of where a typical person is. How do we measure relative poverty? Well, the common measure is the percentage of a population living on less than 60% of median disposable incomes. But we might also think about it, relative poverty in a broader context, relative differences in consumption, access to goods and services, including healthcare, education and housing, relative consumption of different goods and services. What we include in those, of course, involves making a value judgment. And crucially, relative poverty inextricably linked to inequality, both income and wealth. So we would also bring into the discussion the Gini coefficient and also the Palmer ratio. We'll cover both of those in this video. And obviously different measures of poverty mean different, they try to capture different aspects. So the Gini coefficient, hopefully you're familiar with this, it measures how equally income is distributed within a society, where 0 is perfectly equal, no inequality, and 1 equals where all the income goes to one person. The Palmer ratio is an important measure. It's the ratio of the income of the richest 10% of households to the income of the poorest 40%. And given that the World Bank and others believe in the idea of inclusive growth, the Palmer ratio is becoming a more important, more significant measure of relative poverty and inequality. Let's just spend a couple of minutes again recapping, revising, going over the Lorenz curve and the Gini coefficient. I want to start with some data for the UK which shows the percentage of disposable income held by each decile in the UK in 2017. On the left-hand side, we arrange households according to the income decile to which they belong. So the bottom decile is the poorest 10%, and they only have 2.9% of income. The second decile have 4.9% of income. Well, if we start accumulating it, that means that the bottom fifth of households in the UK have only 7.8% of income. And of course, as we go up across from left to right, the shares of income rise, obviously, because they're in higher income brackets, all the way through to the top decile, which has a quarter of the income. So hopefully my maths is correct here, but as we go through the deciles and we show a cumulative share of income, that figure starts to climb, such that the top 20% have more than 40% of income in the UK. Now, a Lorenz curve arranges and ranks households from poorest to richest and graphs the cumulative share of income and households. Income on the y-axis, households on the x-axis. If there was no inequality, then we would have a straight line Lorenz curve. It's called the line of equality, where each decile has the same share of income. Of course, we know that's not the case. If you look on the left-hand side again, people on the bottom have a disproportionately low share of income. People on the top decile have a disproportionately large share of income. By the way, this is disposable income after tax and benefits. So we end up with something which looks like this. This is the Lorenz curve actually for the UK in 2017, showing a gap between the line of equality and the actual path of cumulative income. Now, from a Lorenz curve, which I've put onto this diagram here, we could also create a Gini coefficient. The Gini coefficient, a measure of inequality, is equal to the area A divided by the area A plus B. So the bigger is that area A, orange shaded area for the UK shown here, area A shown there. The bigger is that area, the greater is the income or the wealth inequality in a country. So which nations in the world have the highest relative poverty inequality? Well, South Africa is a really good example of a country which has some of the highest income inequality in the world. Here's a picture of Johannesburg. Indeed, South Africa has the highest Gini coefficient, I think, in the world. A Gini coefficient shown here is 63 or 0.63. Don't forget, a figure of 100 or 1 would be perfect inequality. These are in fact the countries with Gini coefficients in excess of 0.5. South Africa is in there, Zambia, Mozambique and Brazil are all in there with very high levels of relative poverty as measured by the Gini coefficient. What I've done here is take the same countries but give you some more data on the income share of the richest decile divided by the income share of the poorest 40%. You see, if you do that, you get something called the Palmer ratio. Income of the top 10% divided by the income share of the bottom 40%, in other words, the bottom 4 deciles. And you get a Palmer ratio, which in South Africa's case is absolutely enormous. Let me do the maths for you. Here's the Palmer ratio, rounding to 1 decimal place in each case. So in South Africa, the richest 10% have 7 times the income of the bottom 40%. That is a staggeringly high level of income inequality. And again, in these countries, the Palmer ratio is well above 1, well above 2, well above 3. And in Brazil, for example, it's 4. The richest 10% have 4 times the income of the bottom 40%. In Mozambique, the richest 1% of the population, 1% percentile, not just decile, have nearly 3 times the income of the poorest 40%. By the way, this is a picture of Maputo, the capital city of Mozambique in Africa. So what I've done here is I've taken the income share of the poorest 40%, the same countries, and shown you the income share of the richest 1%. And in all cases, South Africa just dipped below, but in all these cases it's well above 20%. 1% of the population have over a fifth of the income. In fact, in Mozambique and the Central African Republic, it's over 30%, nearly 1/3 of the income. Which countries in the world have the lowest inequality? So we tend to focus on countries that have very high Gini coefficients and Palmer ratios. Well, these are the nations with the lowest Gini coefficient: Slovenia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Ukraine, Iceland, Norway and Finland. So a preponderance there of European countries, nearly all highly ranked on HDI with the exception of Ukraine, but they have a Gini coefficient of less than 0.3. Again, keep in mind the Palmer ratios here, for example, you divide income of the top 10 by income of poorest 40%. So in these situations, in some countries, the Palmer ratio for these countries is less than 1. What we'll do in the next video is spend a little bit of time thinking about why extreme poverty exists and persists. What are the key causes of absolute poverty?